She was carrying a mattress down Rosewood Street at 4:17 in the afternoon. No dolly, no truck, no one to help. Just a woman gripping a queen-size mattress wrapped in a fitted sheet, moving it 3 feet at a time, stopping every half block to fix her hold. Beside her walked a girl no older than 6, carrying a black trash bag in both hands. The bag was almost as big as she was. A black car slowed 2 blocks behind them. The man in the back seat did not tell his driver to stop because of the woman. He told him to stop because of the street sign. He knew that address. He had grown up there. Desmond Ellison Rhodes had been on a call for 43 minutes. A development deal downtown, 14 units, numbers clean, projections conservative enough to comfort investors and aggressive enough to make them rich. He had built a career on that balance. He listened to his attorney lay out the closing timeline while the city slid past tinted glass that cost more than most people paid in rent for half a year. The car smelled like leather and silence. A bottle of water sat unopened in the console. A tablet waited on the seat with 4 contracts queued for signature. The air conditioning held 68 degrees no matter what happened outside. Desmond had spent 22 years building a life where nothing outside the glass reached him unless he decided it should. He was not looking out the window. He was looking at the tablet. Then he was not. Something had crossed the edge of his vision the way a bad cell crosses a clean spreadsheet. Not large, not loud, just wrong enough to pull his attention before his mind could explain why. A woman carrying a mattress alone, tilted at an angle that meant she could not see where she was going. Her body bent under it like a tree that had been leaning into the same wind for too long. Beside her, close enough to touch the mattress but too small to lift it, a child walked with a trash bag held in both arms. He watched them for 4 seconds. The attorney kept talking. Desmond was no longer listening. He did not feel pity, and he did not feel the reflex to help. What he felt was closer to recognition, though he could not have named it then. The woman shifted the mattress again, moved it another 3 feet. The child adjusted her grip without being told, without looking up, without asking for anything. Desmond's eyes moved past them to the street sign at the corner, Rosewood Street. He read it the way you read a name you have not said out loud in years, not with surprise, but with the stillness that comes right before a door opens that you thought you had locked for good. He knew this block. He had known every crack in its pavement 19 years ago. He knew what stood at the end of it. He knew the house number without needing to see it. The attorney asked about permits. Desmond did not answer. "Stop the car." The driver looked in the mirror. Desmond had not raised his voice, had not shifted his posture, had not moved his face. But something in the 2 words carried a weight the driver had not heard. In the 11 months he had worked for this man. The car stopped. Desmond ended the call without saying goodbye, set the tablet face down, and opened the door. The heat came in all at once, and with it the sound of a city he had been driving through for years without once slowing down to listen. He stepped onto a sidewalk he had not stood on since he was 23. The woman with the mattress kept moving. She had not looked back. She did not know anyone was watching. She was still walking toward the end of the block, toward the house, toward the address he already knew she was going to reach. He did not follow her, not yet. He stood on the sidewalk and watched her move toward a place that used to be his. Naomi Grace Whitfield had been carrying the mattress for 11 blocks. She had started on Bellamy Street at 3:45 with the mattress on her back and her daughter beside her. By the 4th block, her arms had stopped shaking. Not because the weight eased, but because her body had stopped filing the complaint. It had passed the place where muscles protest and entered the place where they simply do what is asked. Because there is no alternative. The mattress was a queen. It weighed 62 pounds. She weighed 128. She had not eaten since the night before, and that had been half a sleeve of saltines split with Nia, because the crackers were the last thing in the cabinet, and Nia had not eaten since lunch at school. The mattress was not heavy the way furniture is heavy. It was heavy the way the last thing you own is heavy. Because if you set it down and cannot lift it again, there is nothing after it. No second trip. No storage unit. No one coming back with a truck. This was everything left of the life she had built for her daughter, and she was carrying it on her back through a city that had decided she no longer fit inside it. She stopped at the 7th block, set the mattress down, leaned on it, breathed. The fitted sheet had slipped at one corner. She tucked it back. Her palms were raw. The right one had a bruise from 2 hours earlier, when the mattress caught a door frame on the way out of the apartment that was no longer hers. Naya stood beside her and did not ask if they were almost there. She did not ask why they were walking or where they were going. She held the trash bag with both hands and waited for her mother to pick the mattress up again. She was 6 years old. She had moved 4 times in 3 years. She had learned what it looked like when her mother was deciding how much farther she could go. And she had learned not to interrupt that arithmetic. She had learned that her job in these moments was to be small and quiet and ready to walk when walking resumed. That is not the behavior of a 6-year-old. That is the behavior of someone taught by repetition that stability is not something the world guarantees. Naomi did not know exactly when Nia had learned it. She only knew it had happened somewhere between the 2nd apartment and the 3rd, and that noticing it was one of the things she did not let herself think about during the day. She thought about it at night after Nia was asleep, in the dark, when the things she could not carry in daylight finally arrived. She picked the mattress up again. A black car had stopped somewhere behind her. She did not turn around. A door had opened. She did not look. She had stopped looking at stopped cars 3 moves ago. Looking meant hoping. Hoping meant expecting. Expecting meant building something inside yourself that would collapse when the car drove off. And she could not afford another collapse. She kept walking. Rosewood Street was 4 blocks ahead, then 3, then 2. She counted them the way she counted everything now, in distance remaining, in wait still possible, in hours before dark. Number 419 Rosewood Street. Desmond read the number on the house before Naomi reached it. He did not need to. He had known it since he was 4 years old. It had been his first address, the first place his feet learned what a floor felt like, the first place he understood that the space between walls could be warm. He stood 60 feet behind her. She had not seen him. She was still moving the mattress, still stopping and starting, still not looking back. He was not looking at the woman anymore. He was looking at the house. It was still standing. That was the first thing that registered. The front steps were concrete, cracked down the center. The same crack that had been there when he was 12. The porch railing was gone on the left. The upstairs windows were boarded from the inside with plywood that had warped and darkened. The paint on the front door had faded past any nameable color into the gray-brown of wood that has stopped being cared for and started merely enduring. But it was standing. He had not been back in 19 years. He had not driven the street, had not looked it up, had not asked anyone. 7 years ago, his company's database had surfaced the property in a routine review of the neighborhood. Still titled in his mother's name, taxes unpaid, listed by the city as a distressed property eligible for tax lien auction. He had closed the file and never opened it again. He had told himself it was a financial decision. A property in that condition was not worth the renovation cost against the neighborhood's projected returns. That was the clean, defensible language of assessment. It was not a financial decision. It was the decision of a man who could not open a door without seeing his mother on the other side of it, and who had decided that not opening the door was easier than facing the empty room behind it. The woman was at the front steps now. She set the mattress down, looked at the door, reached into her coat, and pulled out a key. Not a house key, a padlock key. The city had chained the door when the house entered the tax lien system. She had bought the house at auction 5 weeks earlier. She had the padlock key, a deed, and nothing else. Desmond watched her fit the key, turn it, and open the door. She did not know whose house she had bought. She did not know who had chosen the paint inside, or planted the window boxes, or sat on the porch every Sunday night for 13 years. She did not know that the man standing 60 feet behind her had slept in the upstairs bedroom until he was 18, and had never come back. She carried the mattress through the front door. The child followed. The door stayed open behind them. Desmond did not move. He stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his coat pockets and looked at the open door of his mother's house and did not go in. 72 hours earlier, Naomi had stood in the kitchen of the apartment on Bellamy Street, reading a page she had already read 4 times. The notice had come in a plain white envelope. No certified mail, no signature required. A single sheet from a property management company saying the building had been sold to a development group and all tenants were required to vacate within 30 days. The 30 days had already begun. None of the tenants had known the building was for sale. The letter was the first anyone heard of it. Naomi had lived there 4 years and 7 months. She had signed the lease the week before Nia was born. She had chosen it for the 2nd floor. Fewer stairs than the 3rd, less street noise than the 1st. And because the bedroom window faced east and caught the morning light, and she had read somewhere that morning light helped infants sleep. She never checked whether it was true. She had wanted it to be true, so she chose the apartment as if it were. And Nia had slept well in that room. She asked for an extension twice. Once by phone to a recording that told her to leave a message no one returned. Once in person, riding 40 minutes to an office in a commercial park where a woman behind a desk told her extensions were not available. The window was firm and there were resources for tenants in transition. The woman said the word transition, the way people say it when they mean something is ending, but do not want to be the one who says so. Naomi went home and sat at her kitchen table. Nia was at school. The apartment was quiet. She looked at the rooms she had lived in for 4 years and 7 months, and she began a list of what she could carry. Naomi had not always been the woman carrying a mattress down Rosewood Street. 3 years and 4 months earlier, she had been a certified nursing assistant at the Grand Avenue Community Health Clinic. Day shift, 7 to 3:30. She wore scrubs she ironed the night before and sneakers she replaced every 4 months, because the clinic floors were hard on your feet and new shoes were cheaper than the back pain of old ones. She earned $19.40 an hour. It was not a lot. It was enough, because her husband earned more. Theodore Whitfield, Theo, was an electrician, local 40, a journeyman for 9 years. He wired the buildings going up faster than the neighborhoods around them could keep pace. He earned $37 an hour and benefits, health insurance for all 3 of them, dental, a pension he would never collect. Theo died on a Thursday morning. A scaffold on the east face of a mixed-use tower on Kingsley Street gave way at the 9th floor connections. Of the workers on it, 2 survived with injuries. Theo did not. He was 31. He had dropped Nia at daycare 40 minutes before it happened. The building he died wiring was finished 7 months later and sold for $82 million. His name was not in the marketing. Naomi took 4 months off after the funeral, not by choice, but because Nia stopped speaking. At 3, a child has no words for what has happened to her world. She simply goes quiet. Nia stopped answering to her name. She stopped sleeping through the night. She sat in the middle of whatever room Naomi set her in and watched the door for the sound of a key that was not coming. Naomi spent those months on the floor beside her, reading to her, holding her, waiting for the silence to break. It broke slowly, syllables, then words, then sentences that never included the word daddy, because Nia had decided, in the way a grieving child decides things, that the word itself was the part that hurt. When Naomi went back, her position had been filled. They offered her per diem shifts, which meant no guaranteed hours, no benefits, no insurance. She took them and added a part-time job at a pharmacy on Halsted Boulevard, $14.20 an hour, 22 hours a week, no coverage, no paid leave. The math stopped working, not all at once. It stopped working the way a table with one short leg stops working, slowly and then all at once. Theo's life insurance paid $42,000. It covered the funeral, 6 months of rent, and the balance on the car. After that, the arithmetic was hers alone. She solved it by skipping lunch, by stretching Niza's asthma medicine from daily to every other day, until a bad night in February forced it back to daily, by selling the car, a 2004 sedan with 168,000 miles, for $1,100, which bought 3 months of medication, 2 months of groceries, and 1 emergency room copay after Nia had an attack at 2 in the morning, and Naomi carried her 6 blocks to the hospital because there was no longer a car to drive. She had not chosen wrong. She had chosen what was possible. The problem was that what was possible kept getting smaller. She found the house through a free library workshop on homeownership for low-income residents. A Saturday morning, she spent in a folding chair while Nia looked at picture books in the children's section. Most of it did not apply to her. She could not qualify for a mortgage. Her credit had been dented by a medical bill. She could not pay in time. She had no cosigner. But one section covered tax lien auctions. When an owner stops paying property taxes long enough, the city can sell the property for the debt. The amounts were small. The properties were almost always in poor condition. The presenter said the word risk 4 times in 2 minutes. Naomi went home and searched the auction list. She found 7 properties. She could afford one. Number 419 Rosewood Street, listed at $2,800 for 9 years of unpaid taxes. She had not seen it. She did not know the state of the roof, the foundation, the pipes, the wiring. She knew only that it had an address and a deed that could become hers. She paid in cash. $140 $20 bills she had kept in an envelope inside her pillowcase for 2 years. The deed came in the mail 3 weeks later. She held it, read her name on it, read the address, and understood that for the first time since Theo died, she had a place no one could ask her to leave. Desmond was still on the sidewalk. Naomi and the child had gone inside. He was looking at the house, but he was not seeing it as it was. He was seeing it as it had been 27 years ago, when the front door was blue. A deep, saturated blue his mother had chosen from a sample card at the hardware store on Cordell, holding it to the light for a full 2 minutes before deciding. Then painting the door herself on a Saturday morning, while he sat on the steps eating a peanut butter sandwich and watching her work. She always painted it herself. Every 3 years the same blue, the same brush, the same Saturday ritual. Eloise Marie Rhodes bought the house at 419 Rosewood in 1989. Desmond was 4. She was 26, a nursing aide at Mercy General on the overnight shift, 11 to 7, because the overnight differential paid an extra $1.65 an hour. And $1.65 an hour over a year was the difference between making the mortgage and missing it. She had no cosigner and no husband. Desmond's father had left before he was born, not with a fight or a letter, but by simply not coming until enough time passed that she stopped expecting him and, after more time, stopped mentioning him at all. She did not erase him. She declined to discuss a man who had declined to stay. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen opening onto a back porch barely big enough for 2 chairs. The foundation had a crack along the east wall, the inspector noted, and Eloise decided was manageable. She patched the roof herself. She sealed the crack herself. She replaced the water heater with a used one she found through a church bulletin board. She planted mint and rosemary in the window boxes because they grew in any light and made the kitchen smell like something intentional. She put a wooden folding chair on the front porch from the church rummage sale and sat in it every Sunday evening after her shift. Not because the neighborhood was the kind of place where sitting outside was relaxing. She sat there because Desmond's bedroom window faced the porch, and on Sunday nights he would look out, and she wanted him to see her there. She wanted him to know she was not going anywhere. The chair stayed on that porch for 13 years. Every summer the wood swelled and the joints loosened, and every summer she tightened them with a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer. She never replaced it. She maintained it. The difference mattered to her, though she never explained why. He was 9 the first time he asked why their house was smaller than his friends' houses. He had been to a birthday party in a 3-story home with grass in the yard and a bedroom for every child, and he came home and looked at their kitchen and the wall he shared with a crack she had patched with spackle mixed from the instructions on the bag. Why is our house small? Eloise was at the stove. She did not turn around, did not stop stirring. She said 7 words. A home is not the walls, baby. Then, after a moment, a home is the decision to stay. And she kept cooking. He did not understand it. He was 9. He filed it where children file the things they do not understand yet, but suspect they will need later. He would need it. 30 years later, on a sidewalk, looking at a house his mother had decided to stay in. Eloise was not a saint or a symbol. She was a woman who worked overnights for 19 years, slept from 8 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon, and woke each day to a house she had bought alone and a son she was raising alone. She kept a budget in a composition notebook, every dollar in her small, even handwriting, nothing crossed out. She paid the mortgage in person at the bank on the 1st of every month, because walking in with the check in her hand was the one thing she did each month that made the house feel like hers. When Desmond was 16, she told him about a tin box under the 3rd step from the bottom of the staircase. Inside was a letter she had written to him the year she bought the house. "When you need to remember where you came from," she said, "coat already on for the walk to the bus. Open it." He did not open it. Not at 16, not at 17, not at 18, when he left for a state college on a scholarship that covered tuition but not books, not housing, and not the feeling of being the only person in a lecture hall of 300 who had grown up sharing a wall with a foundation crack. He did not open it, because he did not yet need to remember where he came from. He was too busy leaving. Eloise was diagnosed with lung cancer when he was 22. She had never smoked. The doctors called it environmental. The 2 decades of overtime in a hospital with aging ventilation. She told him 3 weeks after the diagnosis, on the phone, in the same calm, organized voice she used for everything: the stage, the plan, the odds. She said she had already spoken to her supervisor about cutting her shifts. She did not cut them. She worked the overnight until 2 weeks before she died. Desmond was in another city, 3 weeks into his first job in commercial real estate. He flew back on a Thursday. She had died on a Wednesday. He arrived 13 hours after she stopped breathing, in time for the silence, but not for the last of her voice. He did not speak at the funeral. 46 people came. He stood in the back and said nothing, not because he had nothing to say, but because what he had to say was for a woman no longer in the room. He locked the house after the funeral, put the key in his coat pocket, walked to the bus stop she had walked to every night for 19 years, and flew back. He never sold it, never rented it, never returned. He never opened the tin box under the 3rd step. He locked the door and walked away. That was 19 years ago. The key was still in a drawer in his office. The letter was still under the step. If the step was still there, if the house was still there, the house was still there. He was looking at it right now. Desmond left Rosewood Street at 23 with a locked door behind him and a career in front of him that would make him one of the most successful developers in the city within 15 years. Analyst, associate, project manager, principal. Then his own firm at 34. Rhodes Meridian Development. The model was simple: buy undervalued homes in transitioning neighborhoods, renovate, reposition, sell or lease at market rate. The market rate was always higher than what the previous tenants had paid. That was the business. He called it value creation. His accountants called it appreciation. The families who had lived in those buildings called it something else. But no one asked them. He was good at it, partly because he understood something the other analysts did not. He knew what a neighborhood was before the capital arrived. He knew how the floors sagged and where the pipes froze, and which blocks had the light that made people want to stay. He knew because he had lived it. In 11 years, he built 14 projects, 912 units across 6 neighborhoods, and each followed the same arc: acquire, renovate, price at market. The existing residents either absorbed the increase or left. Most left. The buildings filled again with people who could afford the new rate, and the names on the mailboxes changed, and the people who had been there became people who used to be there. Desmond did not think of himself as a man who displaced families. He thought of himself as a man who created value in underperforming markets. The language insulated him the way the tinted glass insulated him from the sidewalk. It was not dishonest. It was simply a different resolution. At the resolution he operated at, the families were not visible. At the resolution Naomi lived at, they were the only thing that was. He gave generously. A foundation in his mother's name for first-generation college students, annual gifts to shelters, a standing pledge to a housing nonprofit, that sent a thank you letter every December that he read and filed. He gave from a distance. He wrote checks in offices and stood in ballrooms, and never walked through the neighborhoods his company had transformed, and never stood on a sidewalk wondering who had lived behind a door before his firm bought it. Until today. Inside, Naomi set the mattress in the center of the living room and looked at what she had bought with everything she had. The room was dark. The windows were intact but so layered with grime that the afternoon came through as a gray wash, turning everything the color of old newspaper. The floor was hardwood, warped in places, buckled near the back wall where water had come in from above, but solid underfoot, solid the way old floors are when they were laid by someone who knew what they were doing. She looked at the walls. Where the paint had chipped, she could read the layers. Blue underneath, then cream, then a pale yellow, then blue again. Someone had painted this room many times across many years, and at least twice had chosen the same blue, which meant the blue was not an accident. It was a preference. It was someone saying, "This is the color this room is supposed to be, and I am going to keep making it that color for as long as I am here." Naomi did not know the woman who chose the blue, or the boy who watched her from the steps, or the chair that had sat on the porch for 13 years. But she stood there with her mattress on the floor, and her daughter in the doorway, and the deed in her pocket, and she understood something without knowing the story behind it. Someone had loved this house. Someone had stayed. The house was still standing. "Is this ours?" Nia asked. Naomi nodded. Nia looked at the room a moment longer, then sat down on the mattress, pulled her knees to her chest, and did not complain about the dust or the dark or the closed-up smell of a house that had waited almost 2 decades. She sat on the same mattress she had slept on the night before, in a different building, in a different life, and accepted that this was where the mattress lived now, and therefore where she lived now. Naomi sat down beside her and put an arm around her, and said nothing. There was nothing to say that the mattress and the roof and the walls were not already saying. In the hallway, Naomi found the marks. Small horizontal pencil lines on the doorframe, each with a number beside it, faded but legible, a child's height recorded across many years. The lowest said 4, the highest said 17. Between them, 13 years of a child growing up inside this house, measured against this frame by someone who had been paying attention. She touched the lowest mark. She did not know whose child it was, but she knew what the marks meant. Someone had stayed long enough to watch a child grow, and cared enough to keep track. Behind the hallway cabinet, wedged in the narrow gap where things fall and are forgotten, she found a photograph, its edges soft with age. A woman in a nursing uniform on the front steps, not posing, looking off to her left and smiling the small, tired, not unhappy smile of someone who had come home from a long shift and sat down in the first place available. Behind her, the front door stood open. The door was painted blue. Naomi set the photograph on the cabinet and did not put it away. She left it where she could see it. Upstairs, in the larger room facing the street, Nia was lying on her back on the floor. "Mama, there are stars on the ceiling." Naomi looked up. Glow-in-the-dark stars. Dozens of them, arranged not at random but in patterns, clusters that looked deliberate. Constellations placed by someone who knew where the stars were supposed to go. The adhesive had yellowed. A few had fallen and lay on the floor like small plastic promises that had not quite held. But most were still up there, still arranged in the shapes someone had chosen years ago. In the dark, they would still glow, faintly, enough. "This is your room," Naomi said. Nia looked at her, then back at the ceiling, and did not need to say anything else. The stars were enough. Desmond heard voices inside. Not the words, just a woman's voice, then a child's, then the kind of silence that comes after something has been decided. He stepped onto the porch. His shoes on the wood made a sound he had not heard since he was 18. Through the open door he could see the hallway, the peeling wallpaper, the staircase, the door frame, with the pencil marks he had forgotten existed until the sight of them hit him in the center of the chest like something he had swallowed years ago and never fully digested. He knocked on the frame. 2 knocks, not loud, not tentative. The knocks of a man who did not know what he was doing there but had decided to find out. Naomi came down the stairs and saw him. A man in a dark suit on the porch of her house. Her house. She had owned it 5 weeks and been inside it less than an hour, but it was hers, and every experience she'd had in 3 years with men in suits had ended with her losing something. She stopped on the second-to-last step and held the banister and did not come closer. Nia watched from the landing through the railing. "I grew up in this house," he said. Naomi looked at him, then at the hallway around her, the pencil marks, the photograph on the cabinet, and back at him, and said nothing. "I'm not here to take it back," he said. She watched his eyes the way she had learned to watch people when they told her things she needed to verify before believing. His eyes were not on her. They were on the wallpaper, the stairs, on something she could not see because it was no longer in the house. It was in his memory, and his memory was the only place it still existed. "Then why are you here?" He did not have an answer, not because he did not know, but because the answer required him to admit something he had run from for 19 years. That he had left this house, not because he did not need it, but because he needed it too much. That locking the door had been easier than opening it. That every building he had raised since had been an attempt to replace the one he could not walk into. He looked past her, into the living room, and saw the mattress on the floor and the black trash bag beside it, and the bare walls and the 19 years of absence that had worn his mother's home down to something barely livable. And in the center of it all, a single mattress wrapped in a fitted sheet carried 11 blocks on the back of a woman who had nothing else to bring. He remembered, not gradually, all at once, the way a room becomes visible when someone turns on a light. His mother had moved into this house when he was 4, with a loan she would spend 15 years paying, and no money left after the down payment. No furniture. A son, a set of keys, and nothing else. The first night they slept on a donated mattress on the living room floor. She had carried it 3 blocks from the church on Cordell by herself, because she had no car and could not afford a delivery and would not ask for help, because asking felt too much like admitting she could not do this alone, and admitting that felt too much like proving right everyone who had doubted her. He did not remember that night. He was 4. The memory belonged to her. She had told him about it once, at 15, at the kitchen table, the way she told everything, plainly, without asking for sympathy. "We slept on a mattress on the floor the first night. I carried it from the church. You fell asleep before I finished making the bed. I lay next to you and listened to the house and decided we were going to be fine." He had forgotten that story. He had not thought of it in 27 years. He thought of it now, in the doorway of his mother's house, looking at a mattress on the living room floor. A different mattress, a different woman, a different child, but the same floor and the same decision. The decision to stay. Nia had come partway down and was watching him with the steady, unblinking attention of a child who has learned to read a room before the room reads her. "Did you live here when you were little?" He nodded. She looked at the layered paint on the wall, blue, cream, yellow, blue. "Did your mom paint the walls too?" He did not answer right away. It was a simple question, a child's question, but it landed where the memory of his mother was kept, behind a door that had been shut for 19 years, and a 6-year-old had just opened it with 7 words. "She did," he said. Nia nodded once, satisfied, as if it confirmed something she had already decided, and went back to folding the clothes she had taken from the trash bag. Small, neat squares, shirts in one stack, pants in another, socks paired and rolled, the belongings of a child who had learned that everything she owned had to be ready to go into a bag at any time. Naomi watched from the stairs and did not explain her daughter to the man, or the man to her daughter. She watched Nia ask a stranger the exact question that tied every thread in the house together, and she understood, without knowing the whole story, that the answer mattered more than the man who gave it. Desmond left that evening. On the porch, he turned back. "The 3rd step from the bottom is loose. There's a tin box underneath it. It belongs to me. I'll come back for it." Naomi did not ask what was in it, or when he would return. She nodded once and watched him walk down the steps to the car, still waiting at the curb. He rode 11 minutes without speaking, hands on his knees, watching a city he had spent 20 years reshaping from inside boardrooms, and did not recognize from this angle not because it was unfamiliar, but because he was seeing it the way his mother had seen it. From the ground, from the height of someone who walked because they could not afford to drive, from the level of someone carrying something heavy with no one offering to help. He thought about his mother for the first time in 19 years, and the thought did not arrive as pain. It arrived as a question. What would she want him to do with the house? He did not need to think about the answer. She would not have wanted the house to sit empty. She would not have wanted the walls she painted to peel, the chair on the porch to rot, the stars on the ceiling to fade, the pencil marks on the frame to be the only proof that someone had grown up loved inside those rooms. She would have wanted someone in the house. She would have wanted it to do what it had always done. Hold someone, keep someone, be the place where a person decided to stay. This was not charity. It was not the reflex of a rich man moved by the sight of poverty. It was a correction. It was a man paying a debt he had not known he owed until he saw a mattress on a floor he used to sleep on. He called his office the next morning and told his assistant to find a contractor licensed for structural work, gave the address and the scope. Full restoration, foundation to roof, and said to begin within the week. He did not call Naomi first. He did not ask permission. The contractor came on Thursday. Naomi met him at the door, listened, looked at the clipboard and the truck at the curb, then called Desmond on the number he had left on the cabinet beside his mother's photograph. I am not going to stand outside and watch someone fix my house for me. If I cannot do the work myself, it is not mine. Desmond was quiet on the line, not because he was surprised, but because he had heard those words before. Not the exact words, the exact principle. His mother had said it differently. If I did not earn it, it does not belong to me. Different words, same woman, different decade, same kitchen. He told the contractor that Naomi would work alongside the crew. The contractor asked if she had experience. She'll learn, Desmond said. She learned. She learned to sand floors with a belt sander the first weekend, to strip wallpaper with a steamer the second, to tape and mud drywall the third. Her seams were not clean the first day or the second, but by the fourth they were cleaner than the apprentices. And he stopped offering to fix them. Nia helped, wiping baseboards, sorting screws into jars by size, sweeping sawdust with a broom taller than she was, doing it quietly, precisely, as if the house might leave if she did not take care of it. Desmond came on Saturdays. He drove himself, no driver, no suit. He wore jeans he had bought at a hardware store because he did not own any and had not since college. He sanded, he scraped. He spent 40 minutes replacing a door handle because he had not held a screwdriver for anything but a cabinet hinge in 15 years. He was not good at it. He did it anyway. There was something in the doing he had forgotten. The feeling of your hands changing a surface, of a house becoming different under your effort. He had built 912 units through contracts and capital. He had not physically built anything since he helped his mother patch the foundation crack at 14. On the third Saturday, the crew reached the staircase and pulled the old treads to replace the joists. The third step came apart in 2 pieces, and wedged in the framing beneath it was a tin box the size of a man's hand, blue tin, scratched, dented at one corner. The foreman brought it to Desmond. He held it and did not open it. He looked at it a long time, then slid it into the pocket of the coat hanging on a nail by the front door. It stayed there. Miss Odessa Bell had lived at 417 Rosewood Street for 49 years. She had moved in at 25. She was 74 now. She had outlived 2 husbands, 1 daughter, and most of the neighborhood she had known when she arrived. She had known Eloise Rhodes. Not well, the way neighbors know each other. Through proximity and repetition and the small exchanges that happen when 2 women live 18 feet apart and raise children under the same constraints and the same refusal to let those constraints define them. She had watched Eloise paint the blue door on Saturday mornings, heard Desmond playing on the back porch, seen Eloise walk to the bus stop every night in her white nursing shoes and sit on the porch 10 minutes each morning before going in. Not resting, but letting the house see her home before she entered it, as if the house needed to know she had made it back. She saw the contractor's truck the first Thursday and watched from her window. The second week, she saw Naomi carrying supplies and the child sweeping the porch, and a man in unfamiliar jeans sanding the second-floor window frames. On the third Saturday, she came out, crossed the 18 feet, and stood at the bottom of the porch steps where Naomi knelt, scrubbing the boards with a wire brush. "You the new owner?" Naomi nodded. Miss Odessa looked at the reglazed windows, the new railing, the door sanded down to bare wood but not yet painted. "I knew the woman who lived here before. Eloise. Worked nights at Mercy, raised her boy all by herself. Put that porch together with her own hands. Sat in a chair right where you're kneeling now. Every Sunday, rain or shine. Said, if she was sitting there, her boy would always know where to find her." Naomi set down the brush and looked at the two shallow impressions worn into the porch boards. The marks she had noticed her first day and not understood. Now she understood. They were not damage, they were evidence. 13 years of a woman sitting in the same place, making herself visible, making herself permanent. In neighborhoods like Rosewood Street, history is not kept in archives. It is kept in people. In women like Odessa, who have lived long enough to remember what the buildings used to hold. "Would you like to come inside?" Naomi asked. Miss Odessa looked at the bare door. The door Eloise had painted blue, the door waiting for someone to choose its next color. She had not been past that threshold since the funeral. She went inside. She walked the hallway, saw the new paint, the mattress, the photograph of Eloise that Naomi had left on the cabinet through the whole renovation, untouched. The one thing in the house that had not been moved. She looked at it a long time. Then she looked at Naomi. "She would have liked you," she said. "She would have liked you a whole lot." The house was finished on a Saturday in October. The walls painted, the floors sanded and sealed, the roof patched, the plumbing clean, the wiring passing inspection on the first try. The front door was blue. Naomi had chosen the color, without knowing it had been blue before. From the same hardware store on Cordell, from a sample card, she held to the light a long time before deciding. Desmond saw it when he arrived that morning and said nothing. He did not need to. That evening, after the last of the tools were loaded and the crew had gone, he came back. He parked on the street and walked up the porch steps. The new chair was there. A wooden folding chair Naomi had found at a second-hand shop and set in the exact spot where the wear marks were, not knowing the history, just thinking a porch needed a chair. He sat down in it, reached into his coat, and took out the tin box. He had carried it for 5 weeks, through meetings and phone calls and Saturday mornings, with a belt sander and evenings watching a woman paint walls in the dark. The way his mother had carried things. Close, waiting for the right time. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet folded twice, in his mother's small, even handwriting, nothing crossed out. She had written his name at the top. Just the name. She wrote about the day she bought the house, about the loan she was not sure she could pay, about carrying a mattress from the church and laying it on the living room floor and watching her son fall asleep before she finished making the bed. She wrote about lying beside him in the dark, listening to the house settle, and deciding in that silence that this was going to work. She wrote about the paint, the blue, the Saturday mornings, the window boxes, the chair on the porch, and why it mattered, and why she would never explain why it mattered. Because some things you do not explain. You just do them and hope the person they are for understands eventually. And she wrote one last line. This house was never about the walls. It was about you knowing you had somewhere to come back to. If you are reading this, you came back. That is all I ever needed. He read it, folded it along the original creases, put it back in the box, and closed the lid. He did not cry. He sat in the chair on the porch of his mother's house and looked through the open door into the hallway, where Naomi's voice drifted down, too faint to make out but steady in its rhythm. A mother reading a bedtime story in a house that belonged to her. Nia's room still had stars on the ceiling. The old ones had come down in the renovation, and Nia had chosen new ones and placed them herself, standing on her bed, pressing each into the plaster with both hands. Not in Eloise's patterns, in her own constellations, her own sky. The mattress was still in the room. Naomi had bought a bed frame, and Nia slept on the frame most nights. But some nights she asked to sleep on the mattress, and Naomi never asked why. She knew the mattress was the thing that had stayed the same through everything, the last surface from the life before. It was not comfortable and it was not necessary. But it was theirs, and sometimes you hold on to a thing not because you need it, but because it is proof that you survived needing it. He could have stopped there. A man makes a private correction, restores one house, pays one debt, and goes back to his life. But Desmond sat in his mother's chair and did the arithmetic he had spent 20 years avoiding. Not the arithmetic of returns, the other kind. 912 units, 6 neighborhoods, every one of them full, once, of women like Naomi, carrying everything they owned out a door someone else had decided to sell. He had not intended to displace them. The displacement had happened inside the math, at a resolution where he could not see them. He had spent a career making the invisible profitable. He wondered what it would cost to make it visible instead. The 14-unit deal downtown, the one he had been closing when the car stopped, was still on his desk. He did not kill it. He rebuilt it. He called his attorney and told him to restructure the project under a community land trust. The land held in common and kept out of the market forever. The homes sold at prices tied to what working families actually earned. The deeds carrying a covenant that the price could never again float free of the people who lived there. His investors would earn less. He told them so, plainly, in the clean language he had always used for the opposite purpose, and some of them walked, and he let them. He founded a program in his mother's name, not a scholarship fund administered from a ballroom, but a working trust that bought tax-delinquent houses before the auction speculators could, and turned them over to families who had been pushed out, deed in hand, with the tools and the training to do the work themselves. Because he had learned from a woman on a staircase that you do not give a person a home, you give them the right to stay, and then you get out of the way. He kept his mother's composition notebook. He had found it in a drawer in his office under the house key, where he had put it 19 years ago without opening it. He did not add up dollars in it. On the first blank page, in handwriting nowhere near as neat as hers, he wrote a list, not of expenses, of names, the families the trust had housed. The first name on the list was not Naomi's. She had bought her house herself with coins from a pillowcase and would not have let him write it. The first name was a stranger's. A woman 2 neighborhoods over who had been carrying her life in her arms the day the trust reached her first. He wrote her name and the address and the date. Then he closed the notebook and put it in his coat pocket, next to the tin box, and carried both. Desmond Rhodes built towers, 14 developments, 912 units, glass and steel, and returns calculated to the second decimal. The city gave him awards. Magazines wrote profiles. His name was on buildings people drove past every day and recognized. Naomi Whitfield carried a mattress 11 blocks, 62 pounds wrapped in a fitted sheet on a Tuesday afternoon, through a city that did not slow down for her. No one wrote about it. No one photographed it. No one gave her an award for carrying everything she had left on her back through streets, redesigned to serve people who would never have to carry anything. One of them built towers. The other carried a mattress. The city noticed the towers. Nobody noticed the mattress. Think about what that says about what we choose to see. The cruelest thing about people like Naomi is not what they endure. It is how invisible the enduring is. She carried that mattress past hundreds of cars, and not one of them stopped. She walked 11 blocks in broad daylight, and not one person asked if she needed help. Not because people are cruel, but because we have been trained to look past certain kinds of struggle, the way we have been trained to look past certain kinds of buildings in certain kinds of neighborhoods. And here is the part the original version of this story never reached. Seeing is not the end of it. Desmond spent 19 years not looking, and then one afternoon he looked, and looking cost him nothing until he decided it should cost him something. That is the whole distance between pity and repair. Pity ends when you look away. Repair begins when you change what you are willing to lose. A man can be moved by a mattress on a sidewalk and still drive to a ribbon cutting the next morning. What matters is not the feeling. What matters is whether the feeling reaches your hands, your business, the math you do when no one is watching. There is a house somewhere near you right now that someone is trying to turn into a home. You have driven past it. You did not slow down, not because you do not care, but because slowing down requires seeing, and seeing requires admitting that the distance between your life and that house is smaller than you would like it to be. And there is someone in your life right now carrying something heavy alone. Not a mattress, something heavier, something invisible, and they are not asking for help, not because they do not need it, but because they stopped expecting it. If this story made you think of that person, send it to them. If it made you uncomfortable about how easily we look past people, sit with the discomfort. Let it reach your hands. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe and tell me in the comments about someone who taught you what it means to stay. This is a work of fiction. The characters, names, and events are entirely imagined. None of it happened, but all of it is happening right now in every city in this country. Roughly 900,000 eviction cases are filed each year. Single mothers are evicted at nearly twice the general rate, and homes sit empty as tax write-offs, on the same blocks where families sleep in cars. Fiction cannot fix housing policy. It cannot fund a shelter or lower a rent or rewrite a zoning code, but it can make you see a mattress on a sidewalk and wonder who is carrying it and where they are going and what it costs them to keep walking. If you want to do more than wonder, community land trusts, tenant defense funds, and low-income housing coalitions are doing the structural work that stories can only point toward. Look them up, show up, carry something. Stories do not change policy, but they change how we see the people policy is supposed to protect, and that is where every change begins.